Good morning. I'm going to continue my series on the 1963-64 United States Chess Championships. And here, Bobby Fischer plays white against Larry Evans. Larry Evans was, for some time, a second to Bobby Fischer, his grandmaster. But I don't think he was second in the match with Spassky. I think in the match with Spassky it was International Master and Priest William Lombardy who was the only second to Fischer. Fischer, as we know, became increasingly paranoid throughout his life, and in 1972 was very paranoid about who would help him and who wouldn't. I'm not saying that he fell out with Larry Evans, but it would be no surprise to hear that Fischer had fallen out with anyone at all. Yeah, but at this time, I'm not sure they were even friends, but he did later become a second to Fischer. That much I know. Okay, so Fischer plays e4, Evans plays e5, and the King's Gambit. Oh, yeah, I love this. Fischer takes it. Evans takes it, accepts the King's Gambit, and Fischer plays bishop to c4, the bishop's gambit. What happens if Black plays Queen h4 check? Well, we're about to find out, because that's what Black plays. And White plays King f1. The idea being that now the king is safe from the usual attacking ideas of White, and White is ready to play Knight to f3 and attack the Queen with a tempo. Just worth having a little guess what you think the analysis says here. White is a pawn down. Black has almost no control over the centre. White has good control over the centre. Black's only developed piece is the Queen, and it's developed to a place where it's ready to be attacked. White has the bishop and develops and is ready to develop the knight with an attack on the Queen. I think, if I remember rightly, it's about minus 0.6. I say if I remember rightly because this is a line I have played so many times in my life it's not even worth discussing. Yeah, minus 0.6 to Black. So Black has 6/10 of a pawn advantage, but is a pawn up. My way of looking at this is to say that White has a positional advantage of plus 0.4. Otherwise, it would be minus 1 because he's minus 1 pawn. So White plays with that positional advantage. Evans plays d6, the Cosio variation, probably the best plan here. And Fischer is in no hurry. It's good, a good chess player knows he has this development with threat in hand. He can wait with it, and even if White plays bishop here to threaten the Queen, the knight still comes out and threatens the Queen. Okay, so if he just develops, he can't take the Queen because he loses the Queen, but the Queen is defended by the knight, so he wins a piece in that way. So he doesn't lose anything by doing that. So Evans decides to develop the bishop not quite as far out to e6, which is a very good square, because one of the big advantages for White in this opening is that he has immediate pressure on the f7 square. So Evans does something about that now. Very good move. Fischer meets that with a developing move, develops his queen, defends his bishop. Pawn comes to c6 with the idea of playing to d4, d5 and chasing away the bishop. The knight comes to f3, says, what are you really doing there with that queen? And the queen has to go back to e7. And the pawn comes natural enough to d4, and this is the whole point of King's Gambit. You get a big centre, you look at some time or other to pick up this f pawn and equalise the number of pawns and have your big centre at the end. You've got to say that the position of Black is somewhat, White is somewhat weakened, but fair enough. It's playable. I think if we look at the analysis now, it will have gone up slightly in favour of White. and it is 0.3. So after not so many moves, it is in favour of white. After 8 moves, it is in favour of white. So black takes the bishop, and the queen takes. This reduces the pressure on f7 because now he's only threatening it with the queen, and it's defended by the queen and king. So it kind of helps black, and also black is a bit cramped here, so getting rid of pieces makes that cramping worse, better, not worse. So black decides to try and hang on to the f pawn, which was threatened by the bishop, and Fischer sees that his opponent's king is in the centre and will have a breakthrough, please. So Evans tries to keep the position closed, and Fischer retreats his queen to the most active square it has. The knight comes to a6, probably looking at some point in time to play to b5. The knight comes to e2, ready to transfer to the king side, ready to overwhelm the king on the king side. The knight comes to b4, and white is forced to retreat. Well, is this just a game where he's going backwards? No. He very soon comes forwards with a renewed vigour. So black castles, and suddenly the promising kingside attack isn't directed against the king anymore. Does this make a difference? I'll just say that in locked pawn structures where one side has a pawn chain, the direction the pawn chain goes in, I know there's only 2 here, direction the pawn chain goes in shows the direction of the attack. So this pawn chain goes in this direction, so the attack should go in this direction towards the king side. Fischer strengthens his pawn chain and chases the knight back, so it didn't make that much difference that his queen got chased back, because queen is now ready to come out with a renewed vigour. So Fischer attacks the base of the pawn chain. Obviously, if he takes, the bishop or the knight can take here. He can't really defend here because when Fischer takes, if he takes back, he loses the rook. So he plays g to g4 to attack the knight. Knight retreats to h2, putting pressure on the g4 pawn. And this is defended by h5. And this pawn formation is known as the long whip. There is a variation of the King's Gambit defense known as the long whip. So yeah, just a point of interest. So Fischer takes with the knight. Why does he take with the knight? So that the knight is still threatening already this move. But Evans takes the h-pawn, and he's a pawn up again. He's got 7 against 6. And the knight is pinned. He's threatening to come here with the pawn and attack the pinned knight. The knight can't move because of the rook behind. So Fischer does something about that. Moves the king to g1 so that he's threatening to take the pawn. You might think, yeah, if he takes the pawn, queen takes, pawn takes, queen. But then the rook on h6. On h8 is taken, and Fischer wins an exchange in that way. And he also gets 2 pawns for 1, so yeah. So the knight comes to h6 to defend the g4 pawn and to make sure that there isn't tension between the rooks. So the knight comes to f1 to attack the queen with the rook. The rook has to go back to, the queen has to go back to e7 and Fischer takes the h-pawn. The whole point of playing with the knight. And now we're back to 6 pawns each. And Fischer's got a wonderful position. All his pieces are active. I know he's got the knight, the bishop, and the queen all on the back rank, but they're all coming into the game quickly with aggressive intent. So Evans plays to d3. It plays rook to g8. The idea is that he would like to play knight to f5 and then pawn to g3, keeping the king tied in on the back rank. Fischer can't allow that, so he plays knight to g3, which has two effects. It stops the pawn from coming to g3, and it stops the knight from coming to f4, so it puts an end to black's plans in two different ways. The rook comes to g6, and the knight now comes back to f4 and attacks the rook, which comes to g5. He plays bishop to e3. He could, if he was happy, just go back with the knight and attack the rook and settle for a draw, but he isn't happy with that. He doesn't want that. The knight comes to c7. It's come back into the game. And the queen comes to e2, making now a real threat to play knight takes pawn here. Has to be taken back, and then the bishop will take the pawn here, skewering the queen and bishop. Game over. So the rook has to retreat, and it goes all the way back to g8. And the knight comes to e2. Why? To open up the f file for the rook. Pawn comes to f6. Fischer takes the pawn, and Evans recaptures the queen. The knight is swapped. Oh, sorry. He takes the knight, and now he's got queen and rook defending, so he wins a piece. So Evans tries to fight on a piece down, but it's not going to do him any good. The rook comes to f1 to attack the queen. Queen comes to e6, and Fischer's a piece up. He wants to swap off as much as possible. He attacks the queen again, so he's forced to take off. The queen's now forced to go to e7, and the rook comes to f6 to threaten to come here with the queen, with the rook. The knight comes to e6, and the queen comes to d5, e5 even, attacking the knight for a second time. Knight comes to g5, queens are swapped off, and now there's so little material left that the advantage to white of having an extra piece is overwhelming. Got the same number of pawns, he's a piece up. And with that, Fischer won his second game in the 63-64 US Championships with a spectacular King's Gambit, even the Bishop's Gambit, my favourite. I think it says a lot about the character of Bobby Fischer. I'm really a big admirer of Bobby Fischer as a chess player, a wonderful chess player. I think only ever Kasparov and Carlsen have been better than Fischer. A truly fantastic player, but a horrible, horrible individual. He liked the King's Gambit when he was younger, and then he got beaten badly with the King's Gambit by Boris Spassky. In the early parts of their careers, Spassky had great results against Fischer. By the time they came to the World Championship in '72, Fischer was a better player and Spassky was a worse player. But after he lost the game in the King's Gambit, Fischer stopped playing the King's Gambit and produced an article called A Bust to the King's Gambit. The article isn't very accurate. If you check what he says in the article with the engine, it's not so very accurate. But actually, the Fischer defence against the King's Gambit is a very good defence. It's a very good defence, and that's the defence which he promotes in his article A Bust to the King's Gambit. But the King's Gambit is a risky game. It's not something I recommend you to play if you're looking just to win chess games. If you're looking to have fun, enjoy yourself, play attacking chess, you can't get better than the King's Gambit. But realistically, there are better openings than the King's Gambit. Yeah, so that was game 2, wins for Fischer. Yeah, don't forget to like, subscribe, share and comment on my videos. Thanks. Bye.